Have you ever been home alone and heard something that made your blood run cold? That creak in the hallway when nobody else is supposed to be there. The sound of footsteps above you when you know you're the only one in the house. Or maybe a knock at the door at 2 a.m. that just doesn't feel right. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true stories from people who experienced their worst nightmares while being home alone. These aren't just random scary tales. These are real experiences that happen to real people. Stories that will make you double-check your locks and maybe sleep with the lights on. Before we dive into these bone-chilling accounts, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss future videos like this one. Also, grab a friend or family member to watch with you. These stories are intense, and you might not want to be alone while listening to them. Let's get started with our first story. This story comes from Sarah, a college student who was house sitting for her aunt during winter break. The house was old, built in the 1940s, with creaky wooden floors and a basement that always felt too cold. Sarah had been staying there for 3 days without any problems. She spent most of her time upstairs in the living room, watching movies and catching up on sleep. The basement was used for storage, and she had only been down there once to check the water heater. On the 4th night, around 11 p.m., Sarah was watching a movie when she heard a loud thud from below. At first, she thought maybe something had fallen off a shelf. Old houses settle, right? She paused the movie and listened carefully. Nothing. She pressed play and tried to focus on the screen. 10 minutes later, another sound. This time it was different. It sounded like something being dragged across the concrete floor. Sarah's heart started beating faster. She grabbed her phone and called her aunt. No answer. She tried texting. "Hey, is there anything in the basement that could be making noise?" While waiting for a response, she heard it again. Drag, pause, drag, pause. Like someone was pulling a heavy box across the floor. But the dragging had a rhythm to it, too deliberate to be something just falling or settling. Sarah knew she had 2 choices. Go check it out or leave the house. Against every horror movie rule she knew, she decided to investigate. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and slowly opened the basement door. The wooden steps creaked under her weight as she made her way down. The basement was dark except for her flashlight beam. She swept it across the room, checking every corner. Everything looked exactly the same as when she had been down there before. Old furniture covered in sheets, boxes stacked against the walls, the water heater humming quietly in the corner. Nothing seemed out of place. Sarah was about to head back upstairs when she noticed something. Drag marks in the dust on the floor, fresh ones. They led from one corner of the basement to another, right where she was standing. Her phone buzzed. A text from her aunt. "There shouldn't be anything making noise down there. Are you okay?" Sarah's hands were shaking as she typed back. "I think someone might be in the house." As soon as she sent the message, she heard footsteps above her. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the living room floor. The same living room where she had been sitting just minutes before. Sarah realized with horror that while she was in the basement, someone had entered the house. The basement sounds weren't coming from someone in the basement. They were coming from someone who wanted her to come down to the basement, to get her away from the exits, away from her escape routes. Sarah quietly climbed the basement stairs and peered through the crack in the door. She could see a shadow moving in the hallway, a tall figure wearing dark clothes. Her aunt had given her the code to the security system, but Sarah had never said it. She had felt safe in the quiet neighborhood. That was her mistake. Sarah stayed in the basement for 2 hours, texting with her aunt and eventually the police. When officers arrived, They found signs that someone had been trying to break in through the back door for several days. Scratch marks around the lock. Footprints in the mud outside the windows. The intruder had been watching the house, learning Sarah's routine. They knew she spent her evenings in the living room. They had been making noise in the basement to lure her down there, away from her phone and the front door. When Sarah finally came upstairs with the police, they found that several valuable items were missing. But more disturbing than the theft was what they found in the living room. The couch cushions where Sarah had been sitting were still warm. The intruder had sat in her spot, probably waiting for her to come back upstairs. Sarah never house sat again, and she never ignores the sound of her security system arming itself. Our second story comes from Marcus, a high school senior whose parents went out of town for their anniversary. Marcus was 17, responsible, and had been left alone before. His parents trusted him completely. The house was in a safe suburb, and Marcus knew all the neighbors. He had plans to hang out with friends, order pizza, and basically enjoy a parent-free weekend. Friday night went perfectly. Friends came over, they played video games, ordered way too much food. Everyone left around midnight, and Marcus cleaned up before going to bed. Saturday started normal too. Marcus slept in, made breakfast, and was planning to meet friends at the mall later. That's when the phone calls started. The first call came at 2 p.m. Marcus was in his room when the house phone rang. Yes, his family still had a landline. His parents insisted on it for emergencies. Marcus answered, "Hello." Silence. Then a click. He figured it was a wrong number and went back to getting ready. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, Marcus heard breathing before the line went dead. Still not too worried, but definitely annoyed. The third call came an hour later. This time, when Marcus answered, a voice said, "I know you're alone," then hung up. Now Marcus was getting concerned. He tried calling his parents, but they were on a wine tour and not answering their phones. He texted them about the weird calls, but didn't want to ruin their trip over what might be a prank. The fourth call came at 5 p.m. The same voice. "I've been watching the house. I know your parents left yesterday." Marcus hung up immediately and unplugged the phone. But then his cell phone rang. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered, "You can't avoid me by unplugging the phone, Marcus." The caller knew his name. Marcus hung up and immediately called his best friend Jake. "Come over right now," Marcus said. "Something really weird is happening." While waiting for Jake, Marcus checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked. He closed all the blinds and tried to stay calm. Jake arrived 20 minutes later, and Marcus felt much better having someone else there. They decided to order pizza and try to enjoy the evening despite the creepy calls. At 8 p.m., Marcus's cell phone rang again. This time, Jake answered it. "Listen, whoever this is, you need to stop calling." The voice on the other end said, "Tell Marcus I liked his blue shirt today." And Jake, "Nice car." "Is it new?" Both boys looked at each other with horror. Marcus had been wearing a blue shirt. Jake's family had just bought him a car for his birthday. Someone had been watching them. Jake immediately called the police while Marcus called his parents. This time, his parents answered. When Marcus explained what was happening, his dad said they were driving home immediately. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers took the report and decided to stay at the house until Marcus's parents returned. That's when things got really strange. At 10 p.m., the landline rang. Marcus had plugged it back in so the police could monitor the calls. One of the officers answered, "This is Officer Johnson with the police department." The voice said, Tell Marcus I'll see him at school on Monday." Then the line went dead. The officers were able to trace the calls. They were coming from a cell phone registered to someone in Marcus's own high school, a student named David, who was in Marcus's chemistry class. David had developed an obsession with Marcus after they were paired together for a lab project. He had been following Marcus for weeks, learning his schedule, his family's routines. David had mental health issues that his own family wasn't aware of. When Marcus's parents went out of town, David saw it as an opportunity to get closer to him. The plan was to scare Marcus enough that he would need comfort and support. David intended to show up at the house later that night, pretending to be concerned about his classmate. He wanted to be Marcus's hero. The police found David parked 2 streets away, still watching the house. In his car, they discovered weeks' worth of photos of Marcus. Pictures of him at school, at home, with friends. David had been planning this for a long time. Marcus pressed charges, and David was required to get psychological help. He also had to switch schools and stay away from Marcus and his family. The scariest part for Marcus wasn't the calls themselves. It was realizing that someone he saw every day at school had been living in a completely different reality. A reality where they had a relationship that existed only in David's mind. Marcus's family moved to a different district before his senior year ended. They also got rid of their landline. Our final story is the most unsettling one yet. It comes from Emma, a 25-year-old who had just moved into her first apartment. The apartment was perfect for her budget. A 1-bedroom unit in an old building with character. High ceilings, hardwood floors, and large windows that let in lots of natural light. The previous tenant had left behind some furniture, including a large antique mirror in the bedroom. Emma loved the mirror. It was ornate, with a heavy wooden frame that looked expensive. She felt lucky that the previous tenant hadn't wanted to move it. Emma had been living in the apartment for 2 weeks when she first noticed something odd. She was getting ready for work one morning, standing in front of the mirror when she saw movement behind her. Just a quick flash in the reflection. Emma turned around, but nothing was there. She figured she was just tired and running late. A few days later, it happened again. This time, she was brushing her teeth before bed when she saw what looked like a person walking past the bedroom doorway. But when she checked, the apartment was empty and the front door was still locked. Emma started paying more attention to the mirror. She noticed that the strange sightings only happened when she was looking into it, never when she was looking directly at the room, always in the reflection. One evening, Emma decided to test her theory. She sat on her bed, facing away from the mirror, but positioned so she could see the bedroom doorway in the reflection. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Emma was starting to feel silly when she saw it clearly. A woman in a white dress walked past the doorway in the mirror. Emma spun around immediately. Nobody there. She looked back at the mirror. Empty doorway. Emma grabbed her phone and called her sister. "I think I'm losing my mind," she said, and explained what had been happening. Her sister Lisa was practical and skeptical. "You're probably just stressed from the move," Lisa said. "New place, living alone for the first time. It's normal to feel jumpy." But Lisa agreed to come over the next evening to keep Emma company. Lisa arrived with takeout and wine, ready to prove that Emma was just imagining things. They ate dinner and watched a movie in the living room. Around 10 p.m., they went into the bedroom to get Emma's laptop. Both women were standing in front of the mirror when Lisa suddenly grabbed Emma's arm. "Did you see that?" Lisa whispered. "See what?" In the mirror, there was someone standing behind us. Emma's blood went cold. If Lisa saw it too, she wasn't imagining things. They both turned around slowly. The bedroom was empty. But when they looked back at the mirror, they both saw her. A woman in an old-fashioned white dress standing right between them. She was pale, with long dark hair, and she was staring directly at them through the reflection. Both sisters screamed and ran out of the bedroom. They spent the night at Lisa's apartment. The next morning, Emma called her landlord. "I need to know about the previous tenant," she said. "The woman who lived in my apartment before me." The landlord was hesitant to give out information, but Emma insisted. Finally, he told her the truth. The previous tenant, Margaret, had died in the apartment. She was 78 years old and had lived there for 30 years. Margaret had died peacefully in her sleep, but her body wasn't discovered for several days. She had no close family, and neighbors only noticed when mail started piling up. The landlord had cleaned out most of Margaret's belongings, but the mirror was too heavy and expensive looking to throw away. He hoped the next tenant would appreciate it. Emma asked more questions and learned that Margaret had been wearing a white nightgown when she was found. She had long gray hair that she always wore down. The description matched what Emma and Lisa had seen in the mirror. Emma wanted to move out immediately, but she had signed a year lease and couldn't afford to break it. Instead, she decided to get rid of the mirror. But when she tried to move it, something strange happened. The mirror was impossibly heavy. Emma was in good shape, and she had moved it easily when rearranging her bedroom the week before. Now it wouldn't budge. She called Lisa for help, and together they couldn't even lift one corner. It was like the mirror was attached to the wall, but Emma could see that it was just leaning against it. Frustrated and scared, Emma decided to cover the mirror with a sheet. That night, she heard sounds coming from the bedroom. Scratching sounds like fingernails on glass. Emma crept to the bedroom doorway and peeked in. The sheet was moving. Something behind it was trying to get out. The scratching got louder and more frantic. Emma grabbed her keys and purse and left the apartment. She spent the night in her car in a 24-hour diner parking lot. The next morning, Emma found a paranormal investigation group online. She was desperate and willing to try anything. 2 investigators came to her apartment that evening. They brought equipment and seemed to take her seriously. Within minutes of entering the bedroom, their devices started going crazy. Temperature reading dropped by 15 degrees near the mirror. Their EMF detectors were beeping constantly. One investigator, Sarah, pulled off the sheet covering the mirror. Immediately, they all heard a voice, a woman's voice saying, "This is my home." The investigators explained that sometimes when people die in a place they've lived for a long time, especially if they die alone, their spirit can become attached to objects that were important to them. Margaret had looked into that mirror every day for 30 years. It was where she got ready each morning and checked her appearance each night. In death, she was still drawn to it. The investigators performed what they called a release ritual. They spoke to Margaret's spirit directly, explaining that she had died and needed to move on. They told her that Emma wasn't trying to replace her, just needed to live in the apartment peacefully. During the ritual, the mirror started reflecting things that weren't in the room. Images of the apartment as it looked when Margaret lived there. Old furniture, different curtains, family photos on the walls. Then gradually, the reflections returned to normal. The investigators said Margaret had accepted that it was time to let go. Emma never saw the woman in white again. The mirror became just a normal mirror. But Emma learned something important about living alone. Sometimes you're not as alone as you think, and sometimes the scariest roommate is one you can't see. These 3 stories remind us that being alone doesn't always mean being safe. Whether it's an intruder who's been watching your routine, a disturbed classmate with an unhealthy obsession, or a spirit that refuses to move on, danger can come from the most unexpected places. The important thing is to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the warning signs your brain is trying to send you. Sarah learned to always set the security system, even in safe neighborhoods. Marcus learned that people aren't always who they seem to be at school or work. And Emma learned that sometimes the history of your home matters more than you realize. If you've ever had a scary experience while home alone, share it in the comments below. Your story might help someone else realize they're not imagining things. And remember, if you're ever in a situation that feels dangerous, don't try to be a hero. Call for help. Leave the house if you need to. Trust your gut and prioritize your safety above everything else. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss a video.